My daughter came home crying after being invited to a Christmas party at my in-laws. When I asked her what happened, she silently handed me a gift-wrapped present. "Mom, look at this." "Why? Why do I have to go through this?" I was speechless when I hurriedly checked inside. This is not a present for a child. I rushed to the police and asked them to catch the person who gave this to my daughter. As a result, the police action exposed the sender's wrongdoing. It turned into a big commotion involving relatives, and the sender received a punishment like the end of the world. I'm in my 40s, and my husband works at the same company in his 30s. I joined the current company as a mid-career hire when I was in my mid-30s. At my previous job, I decided to change jobs when my boss, at a party, called me an old maid for not being married at 30. The current company values merit over gender or age. My husband, who became my direct supervisor, took care of me when I joined. We had a shotgun wedding and now have a daughter in 3rd grade. She's a quiet girl who loves reading and is kind to everyone. My husband has a sister who is a troublesome figure, and my relationship with her is far from good. Luckily, I have a good relationship with my in-laws, so things are somewhat smooth. My sister-in-law, who adores her brother, my husband, seems to dislike that I, older than my husband, am his wife. She looked down on me for having a shotgun wedding. An old hag having a shotgun wedding? Seems like you're just overflowing with sexual desire. Gross. Despite saying that, she used to come over frequently when we first got married. Having a baby at an older age means it's harder to get your body back. I wish my brother would be disillusioned seeing your wrinkled, saggy belly. She'd laugh at my big belly, suggesting it might sag to the floor. I was even told I'd go gray from the stress of childbirth. In the end, she'd always leave saying, "Just age more and get dumped by my brother." I try to ignore her, but feel inferior being older than my husband. So, I try to distract myself and not take it to heart. But it's not like I'm not hurt. Sometimes, her mean laughter haunts me. Then, shortly before I was due, her pregnancy was revealed, and she too had a shotgun wedding. It seemed she had no capacity to worry about others, so my sister-in-law stopped coming to our house, and the chances of us seeing each other dropped abruptly. As she moved to another city after marrying and living with my in-laws. I was relieved not to be exposed to her sarcasm anymore. Now I could focus on my childbirth. I later gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The birth of my daughter was a bit tough and took some time, but I got courage from my husband holding my hand and encouraging me the whole time. When our daughter's first cry echoed in the delivery room, my husband thanked me and said, "You did great," and we both cried tears of joy. 7 months after our daughter was born, my sister-in-law had a baby boy. Then, she started coming to our house, a 1-hour drive each way, just to make snide comments to me. Moreover, the comparisons she made were between our children. It's obvious that a kid born to an older mom would have a wrinkled face. My kid's skin is so smooth, isn't it? The age of the mother at birth really affects the child. Can you believe she'd say that? I was just dumbfounded. At that point, I was too busy with new parenting challenges to pay much attention to her snide remarks. The problem was that she never brought any baby supplies with her. She'd come without spare diapers or formula, and then take a bunch home, saying she didn't want to run out. She'd even take home an unopened formula as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I was really baffled by her behavior of coming to insult me and then taking things home. But then she stopped coming. My husband said that her husband's job involves frequent transfers, and they moved to a different state. We had some peaceful times until our daughter started elementary school and found out her cousin, my sister-in-law's son, was also enrolled there. We moved back here because of my husband's job transfer. I knew then that my peace was over. Regardless of our relationship, my daughter and her cousin got along well. My daughter, being bigger and very sincere and kind, took good care of her cousin. He, on the other hand, was very popular and always surrounded by friends. When they reached the 3rd grade, they ended up in the same class. One day, my daughter won an award for a reading reflection she wrote for a summer project. even got published in the newspaper. The whole family and relatives were talking about it. The school they attend operates on a trimester system, with a 1-week break between summer and winter breaks. We were visiting my in-laws during that time. This time, perhaps because they heard my daughter's reading reflection had won an award, there were relatives present who usually don't get together. But my sister-in-law didn't like that our family was the center of attention. "It's not fair. That book was supposed to be for my son, but your daughter took it." The truth was, they had just swapped books. They couldn't decide which book they wanted to read, so they agreed to swap after finishing. After each of them finished reading the 2 books, they discussed and decided together which book report they would write. My nephew liked the book my daughter read first, so she let him have it. When I explained this, my sister-in-law accused me of writing the reflection for my daughter. Actually, I used to write novels as a hobby in college. She must have heard from my husband about that. Unknown to me, my sister-in-law was spreading rumors among the parents at school that I had a connection with one of the judges and had asked for a favor for my daughter's writing competition. My daughter heard the rumors and was downcast. Seeing her so downcast that she even stopped reading her favorite books, I had reached the limit of my patience. I couldn't stand it anymore, seeing her so upset not just over me, but now she was the target of the mean comments. I wanted to discuss everything that had happened with my in-laws, but I first confessed everything to my husband. For the first time, I told him everything his sister had done to me since we got married. She had even taken clothes I bought for my daughter when she was a baby. "Babies can't tell the difference between boys' and girls' clothes," she would say. She even hit me and called me fat when I was pregnant, saying I looked like a sumo wrestler and should try a sumo stomp. My husband was furious, saying it's not something to say to a pregnant woman and that his sister's actions were like theft. He decided we should share this with his parents, and he would be the one to tell them. Then, my husband and his parents went to my sister-in-law's house together. She was surprised to see her parents suddenly, but was overjoyed to see her beloved older brother. However, she ended up getting a harsh lecture from him and started to resent me. "You snitched to my favorite brother, you old hag. Acting like a tragic heroine must feel good, right? It's the worst for me, though. Take responsibility, you old maid." At first, I answered her calls thinking she was apologizing, but it was just her venting her grudges. After that, I set her calls to go straight to voicemail and ignored them. The calls stopped after about half a month. I thought she got bored since I wasn't responding, but I found out later that wasn't the case. In December, a children's Christmas party was organized at my in-laws. It was the first time they did something like that, so I wondered why this year, but my daughter was excited to receive an invitation. She had fond memories of a Christmas party at her kindergarten and thought elementary school would have one too. However, her school didn't do it because of their stance on religious events. Why bother with religious reasoning when Christmas has evolved in its own unique way? I thought, but apparently, some parents are quite fussy about it. I told my daughter we should do it at home, and we had our own family celebration last year. She enjoyed exchanging gifts at the party. The invitation for the party at my in-laws stated that we should prepare a gift within a $20 budget. My daughter and I spent time at a nearby large shopping mall choosing the present. She picked out one of her favorite picture books, hoping to share her thoughts with whoever received it. On the day of the Christmas party, she carefully held the present she picked and happily headed to my in-laws. Their house is a 10-minute bus ride from the bus stop, a minute's walk from our house. I let my mother-in-law know my daughter was coming, and she offered to pick her up. 10 minutes later, my mother-in-law called to say my daughter arrived at her house, and I finally relaxed. But 30 minutes after that, everything changed. I thought my daughter would be enjoying the Christmas party by now, but suddenly I heard the front door open. It was a weekday, and my husband was at work. I was working from home because my daughter was on winter break. The door opening unexpectedly alarmed me, so I hurried to the entrance, only to find my daughter sitting on the floor, crying. I asked her what happened, and she handed me a gift-wrapped bag. She said I would understand once I looked inside, so I took out the contents. Inside was a torn-up newspaper with my daughter's reading reflection printed on it, along with a message card. The card, written in red ink, said, "If you get too cocky, you and your family will end up like this stuffed animal." There were also patterns that looked like blood splatters. Peeking further inside, there was a stuffed animal that had been torn to pieces and splattered with red ink. This was too malicious to be a joke. There's no way my daughter would coincidentally receive such a gift during the exchange. When I asked her what it meant, she said my sister-in-law had prepared this special present for her. This time, the Christmas party was meant to be child-focused, so we had all agreed as a family that adults should refrain from personally preparing gifts. That's why I didn't accompany my daughter. Yet, there was my sister-in-law at my in-laws' house. Knowing what she had done to me and my daughter, my mother-in-law would have informed me if my sister-in-law was there. This meant she was there without my mother-in-law noticing. "Didn't you tell Grandma?" My mother-in-law had always said to let her know if her daughter did or said anything to us. I had also communicated this to my daughter. I tried to tell her, but my aunt grabbed my hand and said she didn't call for me. She said only children with a connection to missionary schools were allowed. My daughter asked, "What's a missionary school?" and I was at a loss for words. It was just this spring. One of our relatives had passed the entrance exam for a missionary school. And it was a big topic of conversation. My sister-in-law's son also went to a missionary kindergarten. There were also stories about relatives who didn't know they were attending a missionary school until they enrolled, making us realize many of us had connections to such schools. We sent our daughter to a local kindergarten and a neighborhood elementary school. My sister-in-law must have thought this topic would be a way to scold my daughter. I told my daughter to stay inside and, with the gift she received in hand, I rushed to the police station alone. I argued that it was a serious threat, but the police suggested resolving the matter within the family. However, I insisted that threats can be valid even among family members or siblings. Not only were there threatening words, but also a threatening letter and a mutilated stuffed animal, which I argued was malicious. That's when a female police officer happened by. She pointed out that threats and violence within a family are still reportable offenses. The female officer took over, empathizing with how scared my daughter and I must have been. After I provided my sister-in-law's address, she promised to go and warn her right away. My wishes were fulfilled in the end, but I shudder to think what might have happened if that officer hadn't passed by. It was disheartening to realize that some in the police still won't act unless it's an actual incident or accident. I wondered how I could protect my daughter in case of an emergency. That evening, when my husband returned from work, I told him everything that happened. He was furious with his sister for ruining our daughter's fun out of spite. He immediately called his parents to protest, since the Christmas party was happening at their house and they supposedly didn't know anything about it. They claimed they had no idea my sister-in-law was there. They had left the back door unlocked, so she might have entered that way. My mother-in-law apologized for not paying attention to the comings and goings of people as she was busy picking up other grandchildren nearby. My father-in-law had been away at work during the day. The Christmas party was mainly organized by the middle school-aged nephews and nieces, and my mother-in-law had mostly left it to them. Apparently, the police officer had firmly warned my sister-in-law later. From what I heard, she was told that any further reports could lead to more than just a warning, so things should be fine for the most part. However, my in-laws were distressed by my sister-in-law's actions, which had gone so far as to involve the police. It could potentially lead to criminal behavior. Consequently, they called a meeting with both our family and my sister-in-law's family, with the parents present for discussion. When we arrived at the designated time at my in-laws' house, my sister-in-law and her husband hadn't shown up yet. They finally appeared right at the last minute, with my sister-in-law clearly sulking. It was obvious she wasn't remorseful and was resenting me for calling the police. Her husband, sitting next to her, looked clueless about why they were summoned. He seemed to have been called without being informed of the reason. During the discussion, he was shocked to hear for the first time about all the things his wife had done to our family. Unaware that things had gotten to this point, my sister-in-law's husband profusely apologized to us, feeling sorry. My in-laws, seeing his reaction, asked my sister-in-law if she had anything to say, but she just responded with not really. She didn't seem to understand why she needed to apologize, acting as if she hadn't done anything wrong. I didn't do anything bad. The police came but didn't arrest me, right? So that means I didn't do anything wrong. Everyone else was dumbfounded by her logic. This is what they mean by being so shocked that you can't close your mouth. It seemed like a waste of time just lecturing her. Then, out of the blue, my sister-in-law's husband declared he was divorcing her. We were all puzzled because it seemed like they had a good marriage. Responding to our surprised looks, he confessed he had reached his limit with her behavior since they got married. He hadn't complained about her not doing housework during pregnancy, and he hadn't scolded her for neglecting childcare and going out to have fun, thinking it was stress from being a new parent. But her carelessness with housework once led to a small fire. It forced them to move. She, being vain, had insisted on their son attending a prestigious kindergarten when she heard other neighborhood kids were applying. But he didn't get in due to a lack of preparation. Embarrassed, she forced another move. While his job did involve transfers, they weren't as frequent as their moves suggested. He revealed that the frequent moves were not just because of his job transfers, but also to maintain my sister-in-law's image. After failing the kindergarten entrance exam, she tried to get him into an international kindergarten, and when that didn't work out, they barely managed to get him into a missionary kindergarten. Choosing a public elementary school was only because their son wanted it. And my sister-in-law reluctantly agreed after her husband supported their son's wishes. He feared their son would be sacrificed for her vanity and had been considering divorce already. With her harassment coming to light, he felt he had no other choice but to announce it now. My sister-in-law, somewhat aware of her actions, didn't dispute what he said, but seemed taken aback by the divorce. "Wait! What do you mean divorce? You never showed any signs of this." Suddenly, she started apologizing to us, thinking it would help. "It was just a joke, right? Just a little prank. I never thought you'd take it seriously." A joke? A prank? That's something done among people who have trust. My daughter knows all about what you've done to me. How could she take it as a joke? Moreover, that hostile message was too much for a third grader. Even adults would be scared to go outside if someone threatened them. I told her that. Her husband criticized her, asking if she could say the same thing to her own child, and said her actions were unimaginable for a parent. Just because someone is a parent doesn't mean they have parental feelings. There are people who can't be real parents. And she is probably one of them. My husband, seeing her crying, told her sternly that crying wouldn't fix anything at her age and that she needed to stop thinking tears would get her out of trouble. She cried even more, insisting she did nothing wrong and wasn't to blame. Why am I the only one being blamed? Is everyone ganging up on me? It's all because my brother married an older woman. My brother's wife should be smart, beautiful, and dote on me. Our marriage and her harassment are totally separate issues, right? We already thought she was a bit off, but even my husband was astonished at her stupidity. No one tried to comfort the inconsolable sister-in-law. The discussion couldn't continue, so we decided to adjourn for the day. Her husband had to drag her to the car and take her home. Their divorce eventually happened, but it was a messy affair due to her stubborn refusal to agree. Her son's accidental revelation might have been a factor in her agreeing to the divorce. He, without any malicious intent, simply shared what he saw with his friends. However, the parents who heard the rumor did not remain silent. After winter break, at school, my nephew talked about having a Christmas party with his older cousins. It seems that at school, they used a class to have a presentation about their winter break memories. Among stories about what they did on New Year's Day and video game consoles they received as Christmas gifts. We all exchanged presents. Then I saw my mom giving my cousin a special present just for her, and I thought it was unfair. When the teacher asked what kind of present it was, my nephew described exactly what he saw. I saw it. The cute stuffed animal was all torn up with lots of red stuff on it, like blood. The story became a topic of discussion among the school teachers, and it escalated into a major issue after the children who heard it went home and told their parents. My daughter, with her heart still hurt, hasn't been able to go back to school since the Christmas party. Since everyone knew that my daughter and her cousin were related, they speculated that her absence was related to the incident. Of course, that was the case, but I wished it had remained unnoticed and left undisturbed. I had intended to wait until my daughter was ready to go to school on her own accord. Her cousin didn't share the story to be funny, but rather to find a way to stop his mom's terrible behavior. He, too, was pained by her actions. Learning this, her husband realized he couldn't delay the divorce any longer and agreed to her demands in exchange for her consent to the divorce. By then, she had become infamous in the neighborhood as the woman who threatened children, and no one would associate with her. She was even pelted with garbage when walking outside and, feeling cornered, agreed to the divorce, thinking returning to her parents' home would end her nightmare. Her husband had no intention of giving up custody, but she readily relinquished it. I'll remarry someone much better than you. Kids are a nuisance when remarrying, so I don't need him. She even said this in front of her son. But he stood up to her. I don't need a terrible mom like you. I have a cool dad, and that's enough. Never show your face to my cousin again. She left with a final retort, you'll regret this later. However, it was my sister-in-law who ended up in tears. When she triumphantly returned to her parents' house, they turned her away at the gate, banning her from ever showing her face there again. With nowhere to go, she resorted to spending nights with random men in exchange for meals and a place to stay. When she couldn't find a man, she borrowed money from dangerous sources and spent her nights out, accumulating a massive debt. Her debts became so overwhelming that no amount of part-time work could cover them, and eventually, she disappeared. My husband and his parents decided not to file a missing persons report, reasoning she's not a child anymore. They agreed it's better this way, not willing to take care of her if she returns. Since then, my daughter has been able to go back to school on her own. Her former brother-in-law didn't move, so her cousin still attends the same school. He now says it's his turn to protect her, and they have become closer than ever. This has led to a deeper friendship between us and my former brother-in-law, as our children have brought us together. My in-laws, calling both my daughter and their grandson their dear grandchildren, step in as guardians when he can't do to work.